Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. This week, we're going to be talking about crawl space moisture, and we'd like to thank Rebecca Stroud for liking and sharing the podcast. We'd also like to thank everybody who's been downloading our 7th ebook. It's called Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, on Amazon. And book 8 should be out sometime in July.
Exciting.
Early homes like log cabins were built right on top of the earth without a foundation, so site location was important so rainwater wouldn't get onto your dirt floor or sink your home into the soil. And then in areas where large stones were available, they would be placed on the corners and along the bottom logs to keep the wood from absorbing water and add to its life.
What is a crawl space?
So it's a type of home foundation with a space between the ground and the first floor of your home, usually 16 inches minimum up to 48 inches, and it can have a concrete floor, stone, sand, or dirt floor. The other types of foundations are slab or basement.
Okay.
For builders, a crawl space is going to be cheaper than building a basement, and they're popular in high moisture or coastal areas. In some areas, some types of clay soil aren't stable enough for a slab foundation, and in a slab foundation, your plumbing is in that slab. So a crawl space is going to give you access to your plumbing. It's going to allow heating and cooling ductwork to be run under your home, and then you have access to it for repairs and maintenance. And you could also have some electrical access in a crawl. One of the disadvantages to a crawl space is moisture. If you have an older home with limited or no access to the crawl, you could have problems with mold.
Why do you keep saying crawl?
Crawl space?
Well, it's a crawl space. It's not a crawl. I mean, if you were talking about a basement, would you call it a base?
That's cool. That's going to be my new phrase for a basement. If you're not inspecting your crawl space, you could have problems with mold or damage to your structural wood or metal framing and not even know it. A wet crawl space, especially with a dirt floor, can support the growth of wood rotting or wood decay fungus, which grows by eating wood fibers and can potentially cause major damage to your home structure, which is very expensive to repair. The CDC says mold spores can be drawn up into the living space and cause an allergic reaction like coughing, a running nose, sore throats, or nosebleeds, which is really tough for people with asthma or allergies.
Interesting.
A damp crawl space can make the rest of your home smell musty. It can increase the humidity in the living spaces of your home. You can have more insects and pests like mice, rats, raccoons, squirrels, which can chew on your electrical wire. You can get snakes in your crawl space, spiders, bats, termites, even ladybugs.
So who would want to go in a crawl space?
Spooky, man. If you're in an older home, the building codes in most areas required vents in the foundation walls of a crawl space, and the thinking was vents would bring in fresh air and allow moisture to vent or evaporate to the outside. The problem is, when warm outside air moves into a cool crawl space, it forms condensation on surfaces and increases the humidity levels. In one study I saw, they analyzed outside air at a 60% relative humidity entering crawl spaces that were about 20 degrees lower in temperature. The humidity level jumped to 95% in the crawl spaces.
Wow.
The EPA says you should keep crawl space humidity levels below 60% to prevent mold growth and 30 to 50% humidity throughout your home. To check the humidity levels in your home, you can get a hygrometer. Some top-rated are from ThermoWorks, ThermoPro, AccuRite, it's ACURITE, TempStick, it's TEMP stick, and XTech, it's EXTECH. In the most recent changes to the IRC, that's the International Residential Building Codes, homes are now allowed to be vented or non-vented. And if your local building code doesn't allow you to close off vents, or if you like the concept of open vents and you aren't in a hot, humid area, One recommendation is to have a continuously operated crawl space fan that exhausts 1 cubic foot per 50 square feet of crawl space floor area and cover all exposed earth flooring with a Class 1 vapor retarder. But I would check my local code because that's going to vary around the country.
Okay.
I spoke to Churnland. It's TJERNLUND. They have crawl space ventilator fans designed to be used in a crawl space with a vapor barrier. They recommend if you're installing a crawl space fan to reduce humidity, the fan should be run continuously for a few weeks to ventilate excess moisture and then set it to around 30% humidity. They said one mistake homeowners make is not running a crawl space fan often enough. They say you can't overventilate the space. Their fans use 20 watts of energy, so it's only a few cents a day, and they have fans with a thermostat that will turn off when temperatures are below 40 degrees if you're in a cold climate, and then it'll turn back on when the outdoor temperatures warm up. And a fan running continuously will help reduce radon levels. Churnland also has radon mitigation systems that you can install yourself.
Right.
I installed one of their fans in your cousin's home.
I was there.
Yeah, it was amazing how much it brought down the radon level in their home.
Maybe remind everybody what radon is.
It's a radioactive gas that's released from rock and soil that's under your home. It's odorless and tasteless.
Well, you sound so excited about it.
Well, it's amazing that more people don't talk about this because you wouldn't know if you had a problem unless you test for it.
Right.
The EPA says radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer and the number one cause of lung cancer in non-smokers. They say radon is responsible for over 20,000 deaths a year from cancer. The EPA, the American Lung Association, the American Medical Association, and the National Safety Council recommend that all homeowners should test their homes for radon and then take steps to reduce high levels.
So you should listen to our Radon podcast?
Yeah, we have some great tips in that episode. I spoke to AirThings. They have a highly rated digital radon detector that monitors long and short-term levels. They say your crawl space will usually have the highest radon levels in your home. They recommend covering the ground with a vapor barrier with sealed seams, seal all cracks between the floor and pipes into your home. In crawl spaces with vents, they recommend using a crawl space ventilation fan and run it continuously. And they say this is going to create a slight negative pressure. It's going to improve the air quality in your home. It's going to reduce air from the crawl space getting into your living space, and it will reduce radon levels. They say you should be monitoring the radon because it varies over time, and if a crawl space fan doesn't reduce the radon low enough, then you need to install a radon mitigation system. And I like the AirThings radon detector. You don't have to send anything to a lab, and you can use it non-stop as radon levels change, and you have short and long term. And that's something you can share with family and friends. The EPA says new research shows vented crawl spaces converted to unvented and conditioned crawl spaces gives more control over your moisture levels. It will increase energy savings and improve the air quality in your home. Studies in mixed or hot and humid climates show vented crawl spaces have higher moisture levels that promote wood damage and mold. An article from the Green Building Advisor said in humid climates, vented crawl spaces increases your moisture problems. They recommend unvented encapsulated crawl spaces using sealed vapor barriers on the floor, sealed around any penetrations from the ground, and extended up the walls and sealed. I spoke to Stego Industries. It's STEGO.
You talked to a lot of people this week.
Yeah, I had a good week. So Stego Industries sells crawl space vapor barriers and seam tape. They recommend checking local building codes in your area before you start a project. Your approach to reducing moisture in a crawl space may vary depending on your climate, but they gave me a checklist of some key best practices.
Okay.
Seal off or remove crawl space vents. Have an access door that's up to code. So if it's on the floor of a living space, 18 by 24 inches is the minimum. If it's on the perimeter of the crawl space, 16 by 24 inches is the minimum. The floors in an exposed earth foundation in an unvented crawl space needs to be covered with a continuous, Class 1 6 mil polyethylene vapor retarder, and that's the minimum thickness.
Okay.
You want to overlap your joints no less than 6 inches and then seal the seams with a seam tape and extend this up the foundation walls a minimum of 6 inches and seal it. If you plan on going higher, you need to leave a termite inspection gap at the top of the wall a few inches and check your local code.
Okay.
The surface of the crawl space must slope to a floor drain or a sump pump pit. Damp-proofing materials may be necessary for the outside walls to reduce moisture into the crawl space. Insulate the crawl space walls to the recommended R value for your location. Install a continuously operated exhaust fan or add conditioned air into the crawl space from your HVAC system, or you can use a dehumidifier to keep humidity levels under 50%. And Stego, they have 6, 10, and 15 mil vapor barriers, and thicker is better if you plan on going into the crawl space for maintenance or repairs.
Okay.
I spoke to yourcrawlspace.com. They have a patented vapor barrier system and sell 9, 15, and 36 mil vapor barriers. They said many homeowners with crawl spaces don't realize that by sealing off vents and encapsulating the crawl space, you're going to reduce and kill pests, wood-destroying insects, help avoid mold and potential structural damage. You'll reduce the amount of energy needed to heat and cool your home. You're going to improve the air quality of your crawl space and your living space. Some research studies say as much as 40% of crawl space air gets into the living space of your home from small openings, ductwork, and the stack effect, where air is moving up from lower levels. When you're encapsulating a crawl space,
What does that mean?
So if you're encapsulating your crawl space, you're trying to block it off from any outside air and reduce or eliminate as much moisture into the crawl space as possible. Most definitions, they want you to cover the ground with a Class 1 vapor barrier, 6 mil minimum, seal the seams, go up the walls a minimum of 6 inches and seal those seams. Usually requires a sump pump or a floor drain or a dehumidifier, and then sealing any openings up into the living space. And that's why if you have HVAC ductwork in your crawl space, you want to seal all the joints on the return duct so that crawl space air can't be pulled up into the living space. And if there's leaks on the supply side of the ductwork, it's usually beneficial. And in fact, in some crawl spaces, you may want to add a small vent to supply conditioned air into the crawl spaces. But you need to try to close off any or all the openings or penetrations into the living space above the crawl.
Okay.
The Mississippi State University Extension said a bare earth 1,400 square foot crawl space can evaporate up to 20 gallons of water into the crawl space in 24 hours, which can damage your home. If you put down a Class 1 6 mil vapor retarder, it's a 0.1 perm. So on average, at around 73 degrees Fahrenheit at 50% humidity in a 1,300 square foot crawl space, it would only allow 4 gallons a year to pass through this.
Wow, that was a lot of numbers.
Yeah. So these vapor barriers are pretty amazing. And some pros are recommending going to a 15 mil vapor barrier with a 0.01 perm rating, and even less water vapor is going to be allowed up into your home.
Cool.
I spoke to Tosot dehumidifiers. It's T-O-S-O-T. They said dehumidifier sizes are measured by the amount of water they can collect in 24 hours based on 60% relative humidity at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So a 30-pint dehumidifier would collect 30 pints of water in 24 hours under those conditions. They said measure the area of your crawl space flooring, your length times your width, which is going to be your square feet, and then compare the ratings of different models so that you can pick the best size. They said in general, a 30-pint dehumidifier is good for 1,500 to 2,000 square feet. And if you have a floor drain or a sump pump pit, get a model with a drain hose or a garden hose connection for continuous use.
Because it drains in there.
Right, you'd set your humidity level and then it'll automatically turn on and off and drain right into the drain or your sump pump pit. Some top-rated dehumidifiers are from Tosot, GE, Frigidaire, Honeywell, Home Labs, Alor Air, it's A-L-O-R, A-I-R, or April Air, and it's April, A-I-R-E. If you have a concrete floor in your crawl space, it's going to be much easier to control moisture. You'd want to repair and seal any floor or foundation wall cracks, use waterproofing or vapor seal paint on the walls, and then use a dehumidifier, and then just have a routine to check your crawl space a couple of times a year. If you're inspecting your crawl space for the first time, you want to be careful of any exposed wiring, especially if the ground or the floor is wet. And if you're unsure, you should have a pro check it out for you.
What kind of pro?
A crawl space professional.
I'm being serious.
So I would have a home inspector come in and take a look at it for you if you're uncomfortable or if it's difficult to get into the crawl space. Although if you have a gas furnace or water heater in the crawl, you would have an HVAC professional come in and have them make sure that everything looks safe under there. If you plan on closing off vents and encapsulating your crawl space, you would definitely want to have a pro analyze how your system is going to be getting air for combustion. You'd want to check for damaged structural wood or metal supports and be aware that old crawl spaces may have asbestos insulation on pipes or ductwork. You'd want to check radon levels, humidity levels, and then if you do have a gas furnace or a water heater, make sure you have a CO detector in the crawl space. If you're purchasing a home with a crawl space, I would make sure it's inspected and then go over the checklist with the inspector. Some of the things I would look for is any evidence of cracks in the foundation, any leaking plumbing. Does the main plumbing drain have a fitting so that you can rot it out if there's ever a backup or a clog? Is there any evidence that there was a backup of sewage? Potentially, could the main drain have a crack in it?
Gross.
You want to check for rusted ductwork, mold, mildew, any fungus, termites, radon levels, humidity levels, asbestos, and if it's an exposed earth floor, I would want to have it encapsulated and have a dehumidifier. So do they have a drain or a sump pit? And I would make that part of the contract.
Okay.
Homes in flood zones may require flood vents. So these are openings in the foundation that automatically let water out of the crawl. So I would
back to the crawl.
So I would check that the vents have seals or gaskets that are going to reduce air leakage.
Okay. Do you have anything else to add?
You should have a yearly routine to check moisture levels and radon levels in your crawl space. And a couple of easy things you can do to reduce the amount of moisture in your crawl is to grade the soil away from your foundation and extend your gutter downspouts 10 feet from the foundation.
Okay, let's wrap this up.
You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, CastBox, Himalaya, or your favorite podcast app.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you can subscribe to that as well.
You can download our books, Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, books 1 through 7, soon book 8.
If you enjoyed it, please give us a 5-star rating and review.
You can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com, and you can follow Cindy on Twitter at FixItCohost, and follow us now on Instagram, Fix It Home Improvement.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.